Well, hello there, and thank you for joining me for this week's edition of Telile 24/7. I'm your host, Adam Cook, and we have a jam-packed show for you this week. Later on in the program, I'll take you to Port Hawkesbury for the Pride March that was held just recently as part of the town's annual Pride Month celebrations. You're also going to hear from the president of the Isle Madame Garden Club, Claire Doyle, about a potential invasive species that could be making its way into Richmond County even as we speak, and about an information session that's coming up later this week to talk about it. You'll also see several items from the Port Hawkesbury Town Council table, including the presentation of a budget that answers the question of whether taxes are going up in the town this year. But first of all, we're going to try to solve this question: should Strait Area municipal leaders be attending a second wind energy conference in Europe in just a 2-month span? That's a question that Port Hawkesbury Town councillors found themselves grappling with last week after a presentation from the Cape Breton Partnership about a wind energy conference happening in Germany during the last week of June that will specifically look at possibilities for Germany and Canada in this field. Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton and a member of the Cape Breton Partnership, Martin Thompson, have been presented as possibilities to attend this conference at a cost of roughly $4,000 each. As it turned out, Town Council voted unanimously in favor of allowing Mayor Chisholm-Beaton to attend the conference if she's needed for it. Here is what the mayor had to say following the town meeting that took place last Tuesday, and why she feels it might be a good idea to check in on wind energy possibilities for Port Hawkesbury and the Strait Area in Europe once again.
There certainly is, a building relationship between Nova Scotia and Germany, and Atlantic Canada really in Germany, with regard to the opportunities around offshore wind. And it'll be interesting to learn specifically what Germany's needs are, and how those needs could be met here locally in the Strait region, and what does that look like? And we can use the information that we did learn in Wind Europe and use that as a bit of a benchmark in terms of the learning opportunity for this Germany trip. So at the end of the day, we will bring back the information that we're able to learn during that delegation trip, and be able to bring it back, in my case, to Town Council to share that information, but also for the benefit of the task force. And Martin, I'm sure, will write up a report for both Richmond County and the town of Port Hawkesbury. So at the end of the day, it just gives us a little bit of an advantage to understand what the national needs are, and how we can meet those, and what are the global needs, particularly in Germany, and how we can potentially meet those needs here in the Strait Area.
Town Council voted unanimously in favor of allowing Mayor Chisholm-Beaton to represent Port Hawkesbury at the conference in Germany later this month. However, that vote didn't come without some concerns being raised about the optics of this type of activity. For example, Town Councillor Jason Aucoin questioned what residents might think of such a move happening just after Council made some difficult decisions in order to keep tax rates the same in its upcoming budget. However, the mayor is optimistic that her current travel allowance will combine with funds being spent by other interests in different parts of Cape Breton to be able to allow her to make the trip without having to dip into town finances.
So that's just a ballpark in terms of what the cost would be to delegate participants. So some of the costs for the Germany delegation will be covered by the host. So for our participation, we'll need to cover our flight and our hotel costs, and then the rest will be covered. So $4,000 is the approximate cost for me to go. Okay. But I'm quite confident I'll be able to cover that cost in my travel, my typical travel allowance. And as we did with Wind Europe, in order for our economic development officer, Martin Thompson, to be able to participate as well, the Cape Breton Regional Enterprise Network will cover half of his $4,000 trip. And then, of course, Port Port Hawkesbury and Richmond County will cover the other half, each of us a quarter of the cost.
Now, since Richmond Warden Amanda Mumbercat co-chairs the Strait Area Offshore Wind Task Force with Mayor Chisholm-Beaton, you might expect that Warden Mumbercat would be going to this particular European Wind Energy Conference once again, just as she joined Mayor Chisholm-Beaton for the Wind Europe Conference in Copenhagen 2 months ago. However, that's not the case this time around.
Typically, that's what we would hope. However, Warden Mumbercat is unable to attend this delegation, and we did have an invite for two people to go, like for at least one person or two people. And I did let council know, it would be great to make sure for sure that Martin was able to attend. But if they wished me to go, I'd be happy to make myself available for that trip as well.
During the latest regular meeting of Port Hawkesbury Town Council, the town's Director of Finance, Aaron McCacken, presented the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. Port Hawkesbury has been able to maintain its residential tax rate since 1987. Is that going to be the case this time around? Here's Aaron McCacken to present the town budget and answer that question, followed by some commentary and budget analysis from Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton. Let's take you now to the Port Hawkesbury Civic Centre Shannon studio to hear from the Director of Finance.
What's really positive within the town of Port Hawkesbury, and I think within nationally, we've been seeing assessment increases. This is something that most municipalities are used to seeing, assessment increases. However, if you look at the trending of our residential assessments, they've been pretty stagnant for quite some time. But we had seen an increase in 2023 last year's budget, and as well we're seeing an increase this year. So 8.8% increase in our residential assessment over last year. We're still low in comparison to the other municipalities in Cape Breton, but that growth is significant for us. But when we compare that to 2014, it's a kind of a staple year that we always continue to compare back to. Over that 10-year period, we've only increased 15%. So on average, our assessments have increased 1.5% a year over the last 10 years. But that growth has primarily happened in the last two. And commercial assessments have grown as well, which is a consistent trend nationally. We've been having declining commercial assessments over time. We have increased 7% over last year, but in comparison to 2014, which is the same year we've used as our kind of our comparison year, we're still down 1%, but we're getting there. We're getting back to our 2014 assessment levels. We've ended up with an $8.47 million budget. And as you can see, the largest component of our budget is assessable property taxes. So that's residential, commercial, and resource taxes, followed by 10% grants in lieu, which are grants that we get from provincial and federally owned properties. Some other smaller amounts, sales of service, that would be our civic center, our aquatics facilities, our services that we sell to others. And we do show transfers from reserves of 0%. That's just because it's a really, really small percent. Last year we had to transfer $156,000 from our reserve to balance. Because we had the growth in assessment this year, we were able to reduce that to just under $9,000 this year. So very minimal transfer from reserves this year, which is nice to see. Expenditures, it's a balanced budget that is presented to you this evening. $8.47 million in expenditures. The largest portion of our expenditures relates to protective services, being fire and policing the larger amount. We were able to provide a bit more money to our fire services this year for required equipment, which was nice to be able to add, and our policing costs did also increase by about $40,000. So there was some pressure there around protective services and increases. The next piece of the pie is general government services, which is all the administration and council expenses, all our grants to organizations and exemptions of taxes, that falls under that category. The Civic Center at 13%, and that's the expenses only. There would be offsetting revenues that would offset that. And the next largest portion would be our transportation and public works, which is all of our roads and streets and sidewalks and all of the works that our Public Works Department provides. So our tax rates within this budget are remaining the same. That's a $1.58 residential rate, a $4.16 commercial rate, and a 22-cent sewer service charge, which provides us $5.6 million in tax revenue. So yeah, rates remain unchanged, and there's been a lot of hard work put in by both council and staff on trying to maintain that rates to signal the openness for development here in the town of Port Hawkesbury, while creating a community that folks want to live in and do business in. So I think that's a positive thing for council and for ourselves. I'm going to continue to say this until we change it. So the town of Port Hawkesbury's tax rate at $1.80, well, it's not even $1.80, $1.58, but combined it's $1.80, is the same as it was in 1987. So that was on the operating side of things, but we'll talk a bit about capital and provide some highlights on the capital budget. So previously we had approved, which is primarily our ICIP projects, $6.6 million in projects. We've added $2.2 million in new projects this year. So we have an $8.8 million capital plan. Of that, $3.3 million is coming from our reserves. This shows, just for a comparison, we look at the net capital assets. So that's the net book value. So it's the cost of our assets less the depreciation, so the use of those assets over time. And so this capital plan is 26% of our net capital assets. So you can kind of consider that you're replacing that percentage of your capital. Positively, I think too, we like to look at the leveraging opportunities that we've taken advantage of. So these projects, $8.8 million of projects are leveraged at 62%, which is a good number. Just some highlights. Water transmission and distribution. We have an ICIP approved project for that. It's $3.37 million. Work has started already. You can see part of that was the Tamarack, removal of the Tamarack water tank. Replacement of the Pitt Street tank is upcoming. There's work to pressure reducing valves, to around meters, around the treatment facility. So there's numerous projects within that scope of work, which we're really excited to have federal and provincial funding for and be able to move forward with to maintain the quality in our water system. Streets and sidewalks, so we're continuing to have aggressive patching like we have in previous years. As well, we're looking at replacing 1,300 meters of sidewalk this year. Around fleet, the wheel loader is set to be replaced this year. Aging piece of equipment, higher cost for repairs, and it's time for that to be replaced. The Civic Center, there's some technology upgrades that will be occurring, as well as generator installation in looking at moving towards a comfort center in the Port Hawkesbury Civic Center. Facilities, obviously, the Public Works facility is requiring a rebuild due to fire, which is a major project that will be occurring this year. As well as some outdoor accessibility improvements around pathways in some of our outdoor spaces. And the outdoor accessibility, Terry, I think we'll talk about that later, but there is some funding that will offset those costs. Continuing with our active transportation project, so connectivity improvements and placemaking focused on the waterfront in Eastern Town this year. Additional connections along the waterfront and reefs in the next 2 years. It's a $3 million project total. Over a 5-year period. Waterfront, so Sunset Park, there's going to be some completion, art installation, and signage in that area and at other areas along the waterfront, as well as installation of kiosks along the waterfront. And we've had some ACOA and provincial funding to help with those projects. If you're in agreement with what's been put forward and the work that we've done over the last couple of months, or 2-3 months, that the town of Port Hawkesbury approves the operating and capital budgets as presented June 6, 2023, with a residential tax rate set at $1.58 per $100 of assessment and a commercial tax rate set at $4.16 per $100 of assessment, and a sewer service charge of 22 cents per $100 of assessment for the fiscal year 2023-24. Property taxes are payable as billed June 1st, 2023 and October 1st, 2023, and interest will be charged at a rate of 18% per annum on overdue accounts.
So, now that Port Hawkesbury's budget and tax rates have received unanimous approval, what does the mayor think of them?
So certainly I think most citizens are going to be really happy to know that we're able to maintain our current level of taxes, both on the residential and on commercial rates. While at the same time, certainly increasing, the wonderful services that citizens come to expect here in the town of Port Hawkesbury, and being able to move forward a close to $9 million capital plan. I think it's a really ambitious budget. People are going to see all kinds of movement on all kinds of projects, particularly I think some that come to mind are, of course, water-based projects. So we were going to be improving our water infrastructure and also on active transportation. I think particularly with the warmer weather, we see people using active transportation lanes all around town. People are getting out and getting active, and it's wonderful to see people out there. And as we continue to build and add active transportation lanes to the town, particularly active transportation lanes that are fully accessible and inclusive, it's great to know that everybody, despite age or level of ability, can get out there and have an active, healthy lifestyle. So we're really excited about our waterfront development plans as well, part of our capital plan. And of course, we are looking at moving forward our commitment and priority around housing. We do have one of our plans around subdivision planning. And of course, we did have that unfortunate fire for a public works building. So looking at a replacement for that asset is something that we also have included in our capital plans. So at the end of the day, in terms of increased services and being able to maintain the line for our tax rates, we were able to increase our seasonal workforce to be able to accommodate some of the tasks that we normally have throughout the summer months around town.
In addition to these budgetary moves, Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton is optimistic that Port Hawkesbury residents will like some of the new additions to the budget, including the return of some activities that haven't been carried out in the town for several years.
Street sweeping. So that is something that we haven't had in our budget for a while. So residents will notice that we were able to include in our budget this year that we will be doing some street sweeping around town, which also always I guess functions in two ways. It improves the look and feel of our streets, but also is a great for preventative maintenance as well. Certainly when we have clean streets, the debris isn't going into our drainage systems, which is also always a big help.
In the meantime, as the dust settles on Port Hawkesbury's latest budget process, the mayor is happy to see that rising assessments in the town are helping to keep tax rates stable for another year.
Well, it certainly allowed us to be able to present a balanced budget and be able to hold our residential and commercial tax rates. And certainly, as our Chief Finance Officer indicated, we did have some assessment growth in both commercial and residential. And it's been a growing trend as well across the nation, maybe not to the same extent as some of our municipal neighbors or other municipalities across the province of Nova Scotia. But we were very happy to see that there was an 8.8% growth in residential rates, 7% for commercial growth, and 8.8% for residential. So definitely our residential growth is a little bit higher than our commercial. But yeah, we're definitely working on our strategic priorities and certainly around offshore wind, opportunities around green hydrogen, promoting the town, and certainly the priority that Council has around building our housing stock from all across the housing spectrum, whether it's seniors housing, family dwellings, high-density housing, student housing, the whole gamut of housing. So at the end of the day, we hope that we will see more of a higher trend in commercial assessments, but only time will tell.
The town of Port Hawkesbury has been holding Pride Month events for the past 6 years. And Saturday afternoon, a Pride March took place that started at the Port Hawkesbury Civic Centre and went up and down the town streets. However, it was a different sort of event than previous Pride Marches and parades. We're going to tell you why that was the case in this special report, and you're also going to hear from Taylor Lindloff, who had a bittersweet time organizing what would turn out to be their final Port Hawkesbury Pride event. There was a time not that long ago that scenes like this weren't common in the streets of Port Hawkesbury. The Pride flag wasn't raised officially until 2017, and that was at Port Hawkesbury's provincial building, not at the Civic Centre as it is today. Even though they're pictured smiling here, Port Hawkesbury Pride facilitator Taylor Lindloff remembers those days. The organizer of the first Strait Area Pride March in 2020 knows there was a time when neither they nor anybody else going through their personal experience felt safe being able to admit who they were within Port Hawkesbury's town limits.
I figured out I was trans in 2014, so I was mostly in the closet for 8 years, which is a long time. And unfortunately, there are people who have been in the closet even longer. And I guarantee, unfortunately, there are still people in Port Hawkesbury and the Strait Area who are not yet feel safe to come out.
According to Lindloff, it's for these people and their friends, families, and allies that Pride events happen at all in Port Hawkesbury or anywhere else. The 2020 event was followed up by scaled-back 2021 Pride activities in the town, with tough COVID-19 restrictions in place at the time, forcing a more subdued approach. However, even those moments were still special for Lindloff.
For those who are not aware, I identify as transgender / non-binary. Non-binary means that I do not fit into the box of male or female in terms of gender. I'm just Taylor. And I came out 2 years ago during the Pride flag raising alongside Councillor Jason O'Coin. And I wouldn't have been able to do that when I first figured out I was trans.
In 2022, Port Hawkesbury held its first ever Pride Parade. And in addition to the Saturday afternoon march hosted by Lindloff and Port Hawkesbury Pride, the town is collaborating with organizers of its annual Festival of the Strait community event to host a variation on a Pride Parade for Canada Day.
Well, I'm not part of the Festival of the Strait who is holding it. I have been once to one of their meetings, and they have discussed it. It's going to be the Pride of many, so it's going to be a mix of multicultural and Pride, which I think is a great thing to land on Canada Day because it shows multiculturalism. It shows who brings what to Canada on Canada Day, honestly. It's like it shows who Canadians are, it shows who our community is and who we're made up of, and I think that's an excellent combination, honestly. So, to Festival of the Strait.
Those basic Pride elements of visibility, celebration, and sharing are still here among those gathered at the Port Hawkesbury Civic Centre on this Saturday afternoon in June. However, as compared to previous Pride events in Port Hawkesbury and the surrounding communities, this year the tone is different, and it has more to do with perceived persecution of the LGBTQIA community across North America. Officially, this is known as the TRANScend March, and it was established to try to combat a rise in violence and discrimination against the trans community in particular, and the two-spirit LGBTQIA+ community in general. The bulk of the activities that sparked this TRANScend March have happened in several American states, which have changed or outright repealed several pieces of legislation that were designed to protect members of the LGBTQIA+ community. However, these actions have also happened in governments closer to home, most notably last week in New Brunswick. There, the Minister of Education, Bill Hogan, made changes to a part of education policy known as Policy 713. Scheduled to take effect at the start of July, the changes include no longer making it mandatory for teachers and staff to respect the chosen names and pronouns of children under 16 without parental consent. as well as a directive to send children who don't want to involve parents to a school mental health professional.
Our rights as the Two-Spirit and LGBTQ plus community were not given to us, especially not on a silver platter. Trans women, especially those of color and lesbians of color, fought for them. They were criminalized, arrested, beaten, and generally faced horrible bigotry for dressing in different gender clothes, for dancing with each other, holding celebrations, and simply for loving each other. Unfortunately, we have come full circle. Tennessee's drag ban was only deemed unconstitutional a week ago. Don't Say Gay is the law in Florida, which forbids trans people from using the bathroom of their true gender, outlawing gender-affirming care for trans minors, and they have even passed a bill which would allow the state to remove trans children from their loving homes. Uganda has threatened the death penalty or prison for being gay and living one's truth. Trans people, particularly trans women, are scapegoats for dangerous ideology. The first Pride was a riot. The first Pride was a protest. I'm choosing to go back to our history, our roots, and decide to march. In honor and in solidarity for all of those who are hurting in the Two-Spirit and LGBTQ plus community, because we see you, we love you, and we stand with you. To those who've chosen to march with anger at injustice, I thank you. For those who march out of love for others, I thank you. For those who are here to march out of love for yourself, I thank you for being authentically you. Love is love. Trans rights are human rights. Queer existence is resilience, and community is a gentle yet radical act of rebellion. I want to finish with the words of Nova Scotia's own Elliot Page. I love that I am trans, and I love that I am queer. And the more I hold myself close and fully embrace who I am, the more I dream, the more my heart grows, and the more I thrive.
Speaking to Telile 24/7 shortly after the TRANScend March wrapped up on the afternoon of June 10th in Port Hawkesbury, Linlaw feels the point was made.
We have to stand against anti-LGBTQ, anti-Two-Spirit, anti-trans laws, anti-LGBTQ plus bigotry. But most of all, we just have to love. Love ourselves, love each other the way we're supposed to. Fear does not go away. Ignorance does not go away without education and love.
So does Linlaw feel that happened on this Saturday afternoon?
Definitely. There were so many, it was an honor to see so many moms come out because, especially with what's going on in Florida, bills have been passed that would, if it fully goes through, trans children, LGBTQ children in Florida could be taken away from their loving families simply because they are LGBTQ or because their parents are supportive of LGBTQ plus rights. So the fact that we had moms, we had families, we had parents with their kids come out and show that a family is a family is a family is an absolute honor.
Even those who weren't able to attend the TRANScend March on the afternoon of June the 10th made their voices heard, including the mayor of Port Hawkesbury, Brenda Chisholm-Beaton, whose statement was read by Taylor Linlaw at the beginning of the ceremonies that preceded the march.
She says, "It is so important to stand with the Two-Spirit and LGBTQ plus community and fight hate in all its forms. Pride is important to celebrate and acknowledge with friends and loved ones, even those who are not physically here with us, but rather cheering us on from the sidelines and around the world. Pride is not a month, it is a journey, and the destination is a world free of hate, and the town of Port Hawkesbury is here for pride."
And as the TRANScend March winds down in Port Hawkesbury, it's a bittersweet time for Taylor Linlaw. They are about to leave their post as the Port Hawkesbury Pride facilitator as they prepare to start a new life in a different part of Nova Scotia. And it's with this in mind that Linlaw is encouraging their supporters and followers to continue the fight for the Two-Spirit and LGBTQIA plus community.
It's really bittersweet, so I'm really happy that we got a good turnout of probably about almost 30, which I was happy if we got 10, because every person who shows up is here to show that love has a place in the Strait Area and in the world. Pride is unfortunately always going to be a process because we have to keep educating. New identity terminology will come out for people who need that terminology. New laws will come out, whether they be good or bad for us. So we always have to keep educating ourselves. We have to keep unlearning what has been taught to us, and we have to keep loving each other. I know that we have come a very long way in the past few years, but there's always more that we can do.
And it's Taylor Linlof's hope that this work continues long after they finish their time with Port Hawkesbury Pride. At the Port Hawkesbury Civic Centre for Telile 24/7, I'm Adam Cook. Is there an invasive species making its way into Richmond County's plant life? The president of the Almadam Garden Club, Claire Doyle, thinks that could be the case, and she's hoping county residents will attend an information session on the subject that's happening this Thursday, June the 15th at 7 p.m. at Centre La Picasse in Petit de Gras. Telile General Manager Becky Bourinot sat down with Claire Doyle at the Arishat Studios to talk about this threat of an invasive species. Here's their conversation right now.
So we're just kind of really starting up our club, and last year we had talked a lot about woodland angelica at our meetings. And so we had tabled that and said, well, in the spring we're actually going to do we're going to have a public conversation on the woodland angelica. So we're going to have a meeting at La Picasse, and it's going to be on Thursday, on June the 15th at 7 p.m. It's going to be a meeting on Zoom, and so we're kind of hoping, and we have it open to our members, but we also have it open to the general public.
So the public can go and sit in on this meeting.
Yep.
And a very important meeting.
Yes, I would think so, because I think right now, the whole of Almadam has been infested with this woodland angelica.
Yeah, and it's only going to get worse.
It is. It's going to get worse because, my gosh, it puts out a bloom in the month of July and August and September, and it puts out seeds like you would not believe. So
right, and now you are going to be having Nova Scotia Invasive Species Council come in to speak.
Yes, we contacted them, and they're going to send out because they're a not-for-profit organization, and they kind of work for the whole province. They have specialists, that volunteer their work with the council. So, but they do have an outreach worker, and that's the outreach worker that's going to be our guest speaker. Mm-hmm. His name is Houston Grimshaw Surrett, and he will speak to us via Zoom at La Picasse that day. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure he's going to have some enlightening information.
I would think so. I would think so. Yeah. And maybe what I'll do is maybe give a little brief history of the research that I did, but I'm not a specialist. He is. And I think if anybody has that invasive species around him, that the woodland angelica around them, and they really want to know more about the angelica, they really need to come to that meeting, and ask questions, because there's going to be a Q&A session there, and you can ask all the questions you want, and they might be able to enlighten us as to what we're going to do with this, all of a sudden, this immense amount of angelica that's around us. It's massive. It's massive.
And hopefully that person can answer questions or actually get rid of some of the rumors that get spread about its uses and whatever.
Yeah. True.
I mean, I've heard many things about angelica over the years, and I mean, it's just been growing and growing and growing. I've often heard, we should be harvesting it. Well, why aren't we? Yeah. Is my question. Yes. What are its uses? That kind of thing. So that person would probably be able to answer all those questions and, put some theories to rest, perhaps, or maybe come up with a notion that it can be used. I don't know, right? I'm not an expert either. I just know that it annoys me like it annoys the other residents.
Well, yes, because it just keeps on spreading, and it's so massive now that it's ruining our landscape.
Right.
And it's invasive. It's moved into our woodlands.
Right.
And there's a lady that lives in Little Anse that told us at one of our meetings that she cuts, she goes about every day to go in that woodland in the back of Little Ants to actually cut some of these, and this angelica down. And she's been putting them in bags and so on, but she said it's like a big effort. It's like massive. And so some people are saying it's crowding out the blueberry vines because it grows so tall. So yes, we do have a problem.
And I wonder, would that affect our wildlife? I don't know, right? Like, I mean, that's another question.
Well, it does, and it does when you think that once it starts to crowd out a lot of the food chain.
Right.
It's the foods are going to die.
Right.
You know, the berries are going to die, and so yes,
Yeah.
it's you know, it does have an overall effect on our environment. That's for sure.
So how did it get here?
How did it get here? Well, let's go into a little bit of the history, right?
Oh, yes.
I guess you could say that the angelica is a love and hate relationship.
Right.
Because the plant is edible.
Oh.
Yeah, you can actually do a lot of things with that plant. So it says in the research that I did, some say that the seed was carried across the Atlantic when the settlers came here from Europe, that they actually brought the seed with them for food and for medicine.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's something that people are saying.
Right.
And someone told me a few days ago when we had a conversation on angelica that the seed was used to stuff mattresses in the ships that came to Louisbourg many, many years ago.
Wow.
And likely the seeds kind of got dumped in the ocean.
Of
you know?
course.
Yeah.
Of course, and they would.
And then the seeds got washed ashore. And that's, you know, the seeds have been here for a long time. The plant has been here for a long time. But the Nova Scotia Invasive Species Council says that it comes from a wide range of human activity. Well, just what we mentioned is human activity, you know.
Right,
so,
right.
And the movement in our economy, you know, the bringing things over,
Right.
you know, bringing
Trading.
the agriculture
Right.
and the container ships and all of that, eh? So the movement of the economy itself could have brought that here. And then once it got here, it just spreads naturally. It's just...
Does it ever?
Yeah, it really spreads naturally. So the woodland angelica is familiar to the Queen Anne's lace.
Yeah.
That you see just along the highways.
Right.
Yeah, when it first starts up.
Right.
It's hard to identify.
Yeah.
They're very similar.
Yeah, people do get mixed up.
And people can get mixed
Yep,
up with
yep.
it. Yeah. And a lot of people still don't really know. They know that the plant is there. The plant grows in their drains and the ditches along the highways and maybe on their properties, in their woodlands, in their backyards, but they don't really know what the plant is,
Right.
you know?
Right.
So they don't know much about the plant.
Right.
They know it's pretty. In the month of July and August and September, it grows really quite tall. It can fill up a big space. And that flower just kind of blooms for a couple of months. So it is pretty that way. But yeah, so it's also a perennial. I found out that it was a perennial plant. It grows, it's a kind of a biannual, I'd say. It grows and it just gets its seeds ready to grow again. So it's continuous bloom, you know, because the seeds themselves redo themselves.
And they can get pretty tall too.
Ooh, do they ever get
right.
tall?
Yeah.
Yeah, they can get as tall as we are. Yeah. And it's in the family of the carrot.
Whoa.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
It's in the family of the carrot. It's in the family of the celery, the parsnip, and the coriander. Yeah, so it's in that family, right?
Wow.
Yeah. And there are many different varieties of angelica, according as you know to where you're at and your location and so on. And there are many different varieties, much more like plants, you know. So and the plant is edible. The plant is edible. So it's edible too. In Quebec, they almost have an industry in Quebec. A lot of people will dry the seed. I noticed that I went on the website and found out that you can buy seeds from Quebec. People sell seeds. And there is, so you could almost say that there's an industry out there. Like people are harvesting and reselling the seed. And the seed is used for consumption. It's used for making many different things, you know, for making medicine. And so it's kind of interesting. That's why I'm saying it's a love and hate relationship.
Right, it is interesting because it would be really great, you know, for economic renewal to have such an industry.
You better believe
here.
it. Yeah, and some people did say, you know, we should be harvesting it.
But where would you? But you have to have a plan.
Well, you'd have to have, if it was, if you were to harvest it, you'd have to do it.
And a facility.
And a facility to dry, dry.
You would have to have all of that in place.
Yeah.
But that's interesting.
But
concept.
it's interesting. Yes,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
It could be money grown in your backyard.
That we have an opportunity to develop a business here because, I mean, we have so much of it, right?
Agreed.
Yeah. So, but it also contains a toxin.
Right.
It says that it causes irritation if you touch it. And you really should be using gloves if you were to cut it down or, you know, do anything with it. So, it's robust. It says that and it has invaded the eastern part of Nova Scotia. It's not right through all of the province, but it's in our part. It's mostly in our part of the province.
Right.
It's also in some parts of the provinces of New Brunswick and now in Quebec.
Right.
And it's moved into Ontario.
Right.
Because it keeps spreading, and maybe the birds are spreading it too, you know, because I'm sure the birds are using that seed, you know, in the fall of the year. It likes moisture, it says. It grows in ditches, and it grows in large, large swaths. You know, when it grows, when you hardly see one plant. When there's one plant, there's like 100 plants, you know. And so, I also read somewheres what one plant can produce thousands and thousands of seeds.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then the wind catches it, the birds eat it, you know, it kind of drops, regrows itself. It's an amazing, strong, really, really strong plant. Yeah, you know.
Resilient.
Resilient, you're right.
Yeah.
Also, I read that the plant is widely used for culinary and medicinal purposes. Culinary, now that's kind of interesting, eh?
Well,
Wouldn't it be nice to get one of our chefs to experiment and kind of take that seed in the fall and cook some dishes up.
See what comes out of it.
See what comes out of it.
Could be something that becomes, you know, native to us.
Yes,
Right.
yes, absolutely.
That's a great
absolutely.
idea.
Yeah, right. So, but I like this line because it's angelic.
Right.
The plant was revealed to the 14th century physician Matthias Silvaticus by the archangel Michael
Wow.
as a medicinal plant.
Well,
Isn't that something?
interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
But
what we do know, Becky, is that
yeah.
it is negatively impacting our environment here on Ilma Dam.
Right.
And, you know, we really need to do something about it. And by opening up the conversation with the community, maybe something will come out of it. If just learning about it and learning how to treat it, you know, and maybe if you want to eliminate it or if you want to do something, even controlling it on just your own property and your own area.
Right.
And you never know, like, you know, I see people today take on the responsibility of cleaning up, doing like a spring cleaning and the municipality does heavy cleaning, that sort of stuff. maybe down the road our community will take on the challenge of doing a SWAT cleaning,
Yes, I
and
was
then
thinking,
maintaining
yeah.
it or something.
Yeah, you could have like a whole weekend of it.
Yes, yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But it's awareness. It's awareness and education.
Right.
And I think that's where our club would like for the community to engage themselves in, is to learn about this very invasive plant and see if we can do something to at least control it.
Yeah.
Because it is, we certainly don't want to lose our native plants, our blueberries and all of our edible plants, that are out there that people are picking in the fall of the year. And
the way things are going, we're going to be doing a lot more of that, I think.
yes, yeah. My niece told me a few years ago that she identified quite a few of the native plants in Ilmadam, and we have some very, very important plants that could be in the numbers of about 30 different species of native plants that we have here on the island.
Wow.
And probably, you won't find those plants anywhere else.
So now, just so everybody knows, if you have the time, and I would suggest, really going and listening and asking questions to make sure that you go to La Picasse on Thursday, June 15th at 7 p.m. It's always a pleasure to see you, Claire.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate all the efforts that you make in keeping everybody educated.
Thank you very much.
So I hope everything goes great. Make sure that you go out and watch this Angelica presentation.
Yes.
Make sure.
That is a really important one. Yeah.
It's important for the future.
Yes, it certainly is. Yeah.
Really, really is.
Yeah, because this woodland angelica is not going away.
No.
It's very invasive, and it's just going to keep damaging everybody's properties.
Right.
It's just you can't get rid of it. So maybe he'll enlighten us. I'm sure he will.
Now let's shift our focus back to the town of Port Hawkesbury. At the regular monthly meeting of Port Hawkesbury Town Council last week, the Director of Finance for the town, Erin McEachern, introduced changes to a low-income exemption for town residents. Here's what she had to say, and here's what the changes will mean.
The last time we looked at this was in October of 2019. We provided notice to council that we were reviewing the low income tax exemption policy on May 12th of 2023. And based on discussions with council, the intention is, and what's in your draft policy that we're looking to approve this evening, is an increase in the exemption from $200 to $350 per assessment. And based on a jurisdictional review, this is more than the average exemption that we've seen. So, yeah, it's a 75% increase to that exemption for those that can use it. The income threshold does remain the same at $24,000, and this is household and it's taxable income, not gross. So there's certain incomes that are deducted from your gross income to determine your taxable income. So a number of the individuals that apply have higher income than that, but their taxable income is below the threshold of $24,000. And this is consistent with our previous policy, but applicants, just for information, must own and occupy the residence on the application. They can't be renting the residence. It has to be, you have to own and occupy. Application deadline is July 15th for that to come in, and then that's in advance of our final tax bill for the year. We do require notice of assessments from the previous year in order to verify your income. And those have been provided, and just for information, the treasurer's decisions on the applications are final, and we don't typically have any issues with that. We usually get probably 20 to 25 applications annually. Yeah. This, I mean, that's at the $200. I guess it would likely be around the same this year.
Also at this same Port Hawkesbury Town Council session, the CAO for the town, Claire Doyle, advised town councillors that a recent letter from the Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism and Heritage for Nova Scotia will allow the town to pursue some upgrades in different parts of the community, including the town waterfront. But Port Hawkesbury officials aren't finished there, and Doyle had some information about a new funding application that the town is going to put through to Nova Scotia's Community Works program. Here's the CAO, Terry Doyle, right now to explain what all this means.
So it's funding in the amount of $37,666.67. That's which is exactly half of the project cost of $75,000. So that's going to go a long way in providing increased accessibility in Granville Green, our playground park, and Sunset Park. Small. We're applying for tomorrow under two programs. One is a beautification and streetscaping program. That's money up to $25,000. So that's going to center around improvements at the waterfront.
While Port Hawkesbury officials are pleased with this funding from Nova Scotia's Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism and Heritage, they're also applying for further provincial funding to shore up some specific projects for the town over the coming months.
And the other one that we are applying for tomorrow is the Community Works program. We're applying for a total of 6 positions, and 3 of those are with respect to our childcare, summer childcare camp, and 2 that will help us with beautification associated with some funding that we've put forward on budget for extra help, and the 6th one is directly associated with our waterfront and work that's going to occur there.
Well, spring is about to turn into summer, and several sports teams and athletic events are making their way back out into the open. With this in mind, we're going to spend the last few minutes of this week's Telile 24/7 looking at the Deputy Mayor of Port Hawkesbury and his request for upgrades to a ballpark in the town. It's the Dan Willie MacDonald Memorial Ballpark. And according to Hughie McDougall, lighting needs to be upgraded and other field upgrades have to be carried out. So he'd like to see Town Council speak to Alan McMaster, the Deputy Premier of Nova Scotia, and the MLA for Inverness, including the town of Port Hawkesbury. However, as you're about to see, other town councillors had ideas about other places that such funding could be spent, and some are not sure that a request for funding to upgrade lighting is the right thing to do at this time. So let's begin with Deputy Mayor Hughie McDougall making his pitch, if you will, for upgraded lighting and other funding requests involving the Dan Willie MacDonald Memorial Ballpark.
I move that our CAO, Terry Doyle, send an email on behalf of Council to our MLA, Alan McMaster, asking if he and or his staff could look at ways of funding for lights at the Dan Willie MacDonald ball field in Port Hawkesbury.
Immediately following this request from Deputy Mayor Hughie McDougall, fellow Town Councillor Blaine Macquarie asked for an amendment to the motion that would also see funding secured for Port Hawkesbury's soccer fields located adjacent to the Dan Willie MacDonald Memorial Ball Field. That brought this response from the Deputy Mayor.
That was always my intent, but I'm a little leery of asking for too much, and it might not be able to bite off everything this year. I was anticipating doing that next year. I think I'd rather get half it is better right now than nothing. And I think if we ask for too much, we're going to get nothing. That's the impression I'm getting.
According to McDougall, funding is needed immediately to address lighting issues at the ballpark. The deputy mayor said that the soccer field, by comparison, is a little farther ahead in terms of this specific issue.
All the conduit, everything is already set up for the lighting for the soccer field. It's already set up there. And actually, I think that we may be able to use the conduit as part of our funding, because for what I was told that could be used. So it might be a good thing, but going back, half of nothing is nothing, but I'd rather get half than nothing.
However, at the same Port Hawkesbury Town Council meeting, Councillor Jason O'Coin had a different recollection of the various lighting issues for the 2 athletic fields serving Port Hawkesbury.
We explored this last year. There's not the proper phase power for the soccer field right now. We talked about this last year at great length.
Who's we?
At council, we discussed it. Gordy presented it to us. It needs three-phase power brought to the soccer field, which we don't have. And it was almost $1 million, if I'm not mistaken, to get Nova Scotia Power to upgrade and put the lights in at the soccer field. And it was just under $500,000, I believe, for the Dan Willie.
I don't want to lose an opportunity here to
I think
get lights for the ball field, but and I understand where Councilor McCory is coming from also, but my intention was to do part A first, which would be just the ball field, how great that would look, and then part B would be the soccer field. We have not one ball field, hard ball field in Inverness County with lights on. It'll bring, I think Councilor Coyne mentioned it before, the tournaments and ball fields. We come September time, we're playing our playoffs, we can't play after 5:30 because we're dark. And so it's okay in the middle of June, the end of June, the early of July to play at 7:30, 8:30 at night, but you're not doing it in September.
Further complicating matters, Councillor Aucoin pointed out that as he understood it, the majority of the minor soccer games scheduled for Port Hawkesbury-based associations this year were going to be happening out of town. With this in mind, and having taken Deputy Mayor McDougall's comments into account as well, Councillor Macquarie decided to vote against his own amendment calling for requests for funding for upgrades to lighting at the soccer field. That led the way for Port Hawkesbury Council to unanimously approve the original motion from Deputy Mayor McDougall calling for provincial funding to be secured by local MLA Alan McMaster in terms of the lighting for the Port Hawkesbury field known as the Dan Willie McDonald Ballpark. And there you have it. That wraps up this week's edition of Telile 24/7. Thank you for tuning in, and a big thank you to my interview guests this week, Brenda Chisholm-Beaton and Taylor Linloff. And special thanks to Telile General Manager Becky Bourinot for her interview with Claire Doyle, the president of the Isle Madame Garden Club. If you have any thoughts about what you've seen over the past hour here on Telile 24/7, or you'd just like to make suggestions for a future edition of the show, I'd love to hear them. You can contact me directly. My phone number is 902-625-8863, and the best email address to use is adamjrcook, cook with an E, at gmail.com. You can also send your ideas and your comments to Telile Community Television directly. The station phone number in Arishat is 902-226-1928, and you can use the email address telile@telile.tv. Don't forget to follow Telile on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and our YouTube channel features every single episode of Telile 24/7, including this one, as well as individual segments and interviews from our shows. And we offer the same service for our sister program, Roundtable. For now, I'm Adam Cook. Thank you once again for joining me for this week's Telile 24/7. I look forward to seeing you again next week with a brand new show. Bye for now.